Welcome to the Emptive podcast, where we chat about cloud-based solutions that make selling your e-commerce products easier, more profitable, and effective. Today we'll be covering surveys and sales in the e-commerce world and potentially challenging your preconceived notions on what surveys are and how the very basics of conversation is essentially a survey. Okay, so today we are talking about surveys, specifically sales in the e-commerce space.
Okay.
So we're going to dive right into what is a survey, right? And for us in this instance, we are going to be taking that sales e-commerce approach a lot, but we'll from a general perspective, it's to ask many people a question or a series of questions in order to get information about what most people feel, do, or think about a topic or something.
Okay.
So,
good definition.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like the general definition. Of course, they can be used for all different sorts of things, and we're going to get into that as we go on. So they're literally everywhere nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you go to the drugstore or the pharmacy, you get
It's
a back of the
obnoxious.
receipt.
Yeah.
They're
everywhere.
After you use software online, you might get an email or might get a pop-up. They're usually after an experience of some kind.
Yeah.
And we're gonna say that kind of over and over again. Like, for example, the checkout experience on a store.
I agree.
Sometimes they're emailed right after you check out, or they pop up, or they wait days later, or even they could wait and send it to you after your product is shipped. That's kind of a popular one now. They want you to get that product before they...
they always ask those silly questions like, how's your site treating you? You know, was it good or bad experience? I mean, it does get a little bit annoying because it's kind of repetitive. You know, did you find what you needed? I mean, I suppose there's some manual out there that everybody's read that says you have to ask all those questions, you know. But, it's like whether or not it's... something on the site that you were looking for, did you find it? I think, right? Yeah. Those are general questions. And,
boiling it up to the top too, so they can kind of, I guess from the store's perspective, figure out were you able to find what you were looking for? And if you're no, then I guess you know what to do about it. And we're going to get into that, what are some of the effects of a survey. Right. But first, there's I think we're going to try to make a distinction between market research surveys and our world of surveying. Right. So there's government surveys, market research.
The census surveys. Is a survey, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And those kind of live in their own world. They're surveying for a purpose of something that's part of that market.
Right. Yeah. Usually they're a third party, right?
Yeah. So. For us, though, we're going to be talking about it from, again, the
store
sales
owner,
piece. Yeah.
The marketing persons, right? Yeah.
Back in the day, not that long ago, when you went to a store and you were shopping in the physical world, a salesperson comes up to you and they ask you questions. And they try to understand what you want and what they can sell you through this conversation of back and forth. And really, that's a survey. And
it is.
I think as time went on, they started to become digital, right? People shopped online.
Right.
And we got some of those surveys that we were talking about a second ago about the, after checkout, or what were you saying? How's our site treating you?
Yeah. Look, I guess that's because they didn't have that feedback that you would naturally get from a conversation with a salesperson, right?
Yeah. So it's just sort of there.
Right. They lost the feedback mechanism, so they created another one. We call it surveys, but they're not quite like a market research survey, but they're more about, well, how's my site doing, performing? It's really, I guess, to alert of problems or situations or something that you might want to buy but you didn't have, right? Something like that.
Yeah. But now we're entering an age where, and we're definitely going to talk about this toward the end of the podcast about kind of where the future is going. But some of that magic that happens, when you combine that sort of human interaction
Mm-hmm.
with that salesperson interaction with some of that computer driven survey technology, and it's a kind of a smart AI machine learning piece, um, as we kind of go into the future. I know that's kind of what we're going to be talking about through the rest of this.
Well, it is changing, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why this podcast is really to kind of capture some of the changes that are going on and where they're going and how they're moving. And I'd have to say that, the customer experience is constantly evolving, and I think it's going to happen at a much faster pace, right?
yeah.
We've had many years of the static same thing, and then we had apps, but I think we're really ready for another revolution in online e-commerce. So yeah, I would agree with that statement. Mhm.
So maybe some of the pros and cons of doing a survey, um, store owners, like if they're weighing the pros and cons, because they can be a lot of work, and that's obviously one of the cons that we're
Yeah.
going to hit. But what are some of the good things? Why would a store owner want to do a
Well,
survey?
they would get some valuable insight, right? Some valuable information from the survey. Hopefully, that would be one. I would think that would be top of mind. Another one might be they might find something that can transform their business, or like their people are looking for a product they don't have, right, or something like that, or
Right.
um, they could get kind of insight on the customer journey. We're talking about the customer experience. You might get much more granular insight if you ask them than looking at your Google Analytics. So I would think those things would be the positives. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess some cons would be accuracy. How are you getting this information? How
True.
accurate is the data?
True.
Are people just clicking through it? Are they putting actual thought into it? Or are you asking the right questions? And you and I, we always come back to that too. It's about asking the right questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not always, what do they say? It's not like what you don't ask, it's what you ask, or
Right.
whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
um, and I think, what are you measuring? And how do you measure what you're measuring? Um, they're also can be difficult to administer in the right way. I think we use one of the examples of, like, let's say your site's like a little slow, your e-commerce store, and
Mm-hmm.
someone's shopping online, and you ask them in the middle of them trying to add products to their cart and navigate your store, hey, how's our store doing? Oh, huh.
You're
You're
gonna
just
get an
going to
earful.
really you're just going to also point out to them
Yeah.
that, oh, I am frustrated. Why am I? Oh, I'm frustrated because your store is slow and it's annoying me, and now I'm going to leave, or whatever. Stop shopping and just check out instead of adding more products to your cart.
There is the
Um,
danger. Yeah, I agree with that.
and all of this kind of circles back to the customer experience. And Dave, you started to mention that a little bit ago. Um,
Yeah.
in the surveying world, and I guess other world, I guess just when we're reading about it, the CX, or the CX score, the customer experience,
Mm-hmm.
that's the abbreviation for it that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the industry uses.
Yeah, that's correct.
So when we're talking about surveys, basically it just consists of everything. The customer experience consists of everything from the first interaction to the last interaction with your brand.
That's correct.
It's all of that. So it's not just the shopping experience, but it's really the entire thing. It's the email they get, it's the package they get, it's the handout, or the little slip of paper that says thank you, that has someone's handwriting on it with a signature and a smiley face. I know you love that, the custom
Yeah.
touch. It's
Or
all of it.
customer service, how good it was, how bad it was. Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
all of the experience. Yeah, I agree.
And here's a Forbes stat for you, which is not it's not a surprising one, that 96% of customers say that customer experience is important to them.
Yeah, I wonder what the other 4% are. What are
Yeah,
they
I don't.
thinking? Yeah.
Right.
They might not have misunderstood the survey. They probably
They
got
didn't
the
understand. Yeah, they didn't understand the question.
what's that question? Yeah. I don't go online. I can't figure out what those 4% would be. But yes, yeah. And I think it is. We all know it's important, and it does. Let's be honest, it drives sales. It's back to, it's about the brand and loving the brand. Even it may not even be sales, but it could be what that person then goes and talks about. I had a great experience on their website.
Oh yeah,
I
the
learned
word of
something
mouth.
today. Right. Yeah, I would agree. I
And
mean,
they'll learn something today. That's interesting. That's becoming more and more popular too.
I
Like
think the learning is, yeah, becoming more. Yeah. What do you have to offer that I don't know? Yeah.
and surveys will probably are they already are, I know, becoming, but are going to become more important even in the e-learning space,
Oh yeah.
where
Yeah.
you there's sort of like automated tracks that people get dropped into, and being able to have that interaction to
Yeah.
gather feedback in that conversational way,
It's key.
that's a whole nother conversation. I won't get us
Yeah.
off
Yeah. It's another.
off topic.
Yeah, we don't have, we're not a shortage of topics around here. Yeah. I mean, I think surveys in general have a great use. And I think, you need to ask and you need to use them, but I just don't think they're being used effectively, right now. I think we're just falling.
So
It's like,
go ahead.
well, I was just saying, I think we've fallen into a trap. We're just using the same. I haven't seen anything new in surveys in five,
Like
10 years.
exciting.
No, no.
So why, maybe get into some of the psychology of like why surveys encourage sales? And again, this is surveys of asking customers questions. It's not the, market research survey.
Right, right.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I think so again, you were pointing to some studies. There were some by the Harvard Business School that they tend to bring out emotion, right? They have a desire to be coddled. That was one of the words I remember reading, and I was like, coddled. But they really were saying, you get a warm, fuzzy feeling, right, about the brand if they're asking you questions, and I could see that being true. And what was the other one? They increase awareness. That I think you brought that up. Like, did you even know we had this product?
right.
And just the fact that, well, you're mentioning it, I didn't know you sold that. So just product
Oh, and yeah,
awareness, or
I
yeah,
didn't even
because you
think of
can say,
that.
yeah, I thought you mentioned that one. No, okay. Well, so that one's one I kind of think of a lot when, did you always get these surveys and they say stuff like, well, did you know we also sell life insurance? And then, not that I cared, but no, I didn't know, because,
Right, right.
so I think those are planted in there on purpose for that reason. There's also just awareness of the products, in general. I think, just because you're asking about them, the people, right? They think about the product, then they're like, oh, I never thought of that, or
They're
maybe I
taking
never thought,
stock of it,
right, or
whether
how to
they
use it.
know it.
Yeah, like I have that product, thank you, but I didn't know you could do that. That would be another, obvious one. And but I think the best one is really, it makes a judgment in their mind. I think, and that's the one I think we're really, hinting towards today about sales. I think, a survey can really put some thought into their mind subconsciously, and I think it's a really good tool for that. And I think that's sort of where the magic lies. That's why some of these surveys, that I don't think they really. I mean, maybe they're just trying to get some information. I'm not sure. It seems like they just copy each other, but I don't really think they're after the sale, and maybe that's for a reason. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I also think it's like I mean, you were kind of bringing up like the subconscious, like, and how
Yeah,
that they can be very powerful. And I think you were mentioning
subtle.
earlier about some of that there are actually some laws for market research
Yeah,
when
sugging.
conducting market research
Yeah, it's the
about how
sugging
you can
law.
use surveys.
Yep, it's fascinating. Sugging, Sugging. Because I'm not in market research. I suppose I never heard that term. Have you ever heard it? It was
No,
sort
no, it
of
was
new to me.
a new one for me. I was like, oh, okay.
But it makes sense, and I think it's the real reason why they had to make a law is really because it works. I think what happened was marketers figured out that they would disguise themselves, or salespeople would disguise themselves as marketers, and
Market research. You
market
mean, yeah, market
research. Right.
research.
Let's just define that carefully, and so that became an actual law called the FTC Act, I believe, if I get that correctly, and that it makes sense. Well, I'd have to say, well, why did they do that? Well, because it worked, right? It, I think people, once you say, I'm asking you a few questions, and then I can put some thoughts into your head, and then I can sell you something. It just really works, right?
It was
And they
dangerous.
wouldn't. Right, they wouldn't have made the law if it didn't work. Right, that's the way I look at it. So,
Yeah.
um, now that's a little different type of marketing, and I agree. But I think the same thing can go for what we're talking about for these smaller surveys, right?
Yeah, and since we aren't doing market research, we're in the business of selling products. So, and we're upfront about that.
Right.
Here we're going to ask you some questions to be a part of your selling process to help you find a better product to purchase. We're going to ask you the X, Y, and Z. So like that'll bring us into kind of some of the new technology and some
Mm-hmm.
of the AI components that are kind of happening now, but are gonna happen even more in the future. So why don't you? I know you have
God,
you're big with like voice, and so voice
I
assistants.
love, yeah.
So
Well, this is what I love. I think if you take that same idea of, of sugging, really, in the sense that you're asking a few questions and then you're using that information to sell again, right? That's the basic concept. Well, I think with AI and the new advent of AI, especially voice, which is really, I think, coming. So, if first of all, let's just say I think voice is going to have a huge impact because we're not going to be typing, right? And so we'll be having conversations. So it's conversational AI.
okay,
But then you can combine that with some of the other aspects of AI. The assistant shopper, right? So I'm here to help you. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and then I'm going to be able to process all that information and come back with suggestions. So I think this Sugger thing is really what we're really talking about here. Is where we're going to take the idea of I'm asking you a few questions and turn it into a sale, right? Uh, totally different. Not the intention of breaking the act, but
so
um,
why do you think voice is the next big thing? Because for me, I'm like I can't stand the voice assistants sometimes. Like they annoy me, and I would
yeah.
rather just type. But I mean, we're also we've experienced technology differently throughout
Mm-hmm.
our lives, right? So why do you think voice is so um,
Well, a couple of reasons. I think
magnetic?
it's all generations, especially even mine. Really, I mean, I really took to voice early on with the Google assistants or the Amazon assistants and things of that nature. And I think the younger generation, I've watched them just adapt that like crazy. I mean, they don't even bother. I mean, it's funny. Even my son doesn't use the cell phone. He uses FaceTime. I mean, I don't even think he knows how to make a call unless it's a FaceTime call. You know what I mean? So the voice and the video and the seeing and touching and things of that nature, I think they're really changed in the entire marketplace, and they're going to continue to go. I just think the technology hasn't maybe caught up, or the user experience isn't exactly what people want. So that, like you were saying, maybe it's a little creepy right now, but it will uh, penetrate the market. A good one was banking. I read that banking it's already up to 50% of voice. So,
fifty
what do
percent
I
of
mean
what
by
like their
that?
searches?
Yep, all their searches and all their, like you want to find out your balance or something, they're up to 50%. So it
Interesting.
probably depends on the industry, John. And then, maybe we don't think of it that way, but once that starts to, I can't figure out how it's going to happen on my computer yet either, but I could see, I have I don't want to say her name. She might
Oh,
listen in the room, but she's always
Alexa.
trying to sell me something. Would you like me to add that to your cart or so it's coming. It's just that I think the adaption isn't there, but I do believe it's the next. I don't think you're going to get as far typing what you want to buy. That's why I think, right?
Okay, so you can tell her to add stuff to your cart all the time.
Mhm.
I tell her, she'll be like, "Oh, do you want me to order this?" Now she pops these things up and she says, "Oh, you ordered this last month around this time. Do you want this?"
We want it again.
And
That's
she
the
just says,
AI, right?
"I'm
Mhm.
like, don't do this to me. Don't tell me I want." I
Well,
hate the reason why I hate the voice assistant is because it's like pulling teeth. It's exact for me. It's the exact opposite of a conversation because a
right.
conversation is this natural flow of back and forth,
Mhm.
and these voice assistants, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm like, no, play the song,
Ah,
play the
I'm glad you brought
song.
that up. Did you just? I got the update the other day on my device, and it's the new conversational one where you don't have to constantly say the name. It stays
Oh,
engaged.
interesting.
Yeah. So again, I think you're absolutely right. But the technology, think 5 years. I'm not thinking next year, maybe 2 years, but it's going to head that way. Now you combine the voice with asking the questions, right? The survey, the three or four questions, and then I don't even think a human I could possibly go within a nanosecond, go through all your records of all your orders, go through similar people like knowing what they buy, come back with some recommendation. I mean, really, do you think it's so amazingly fast and efficient?
It's actually going to change the way we communicate because the a lot of the nuances between conversation
Hmm.
will leave us room for processing and leave us room while we do other things. So
Right.
with the natural back and forth of a conversation, you have pauses for tons of reasons, but like
That's right.
one of
Yeah.
them is to stop and think for that split
Hmm.
second.
Mm,
Right. But also when you're like in a social setting and you're a salesperson and you're selling someone, like I worked in like retail at a
hmm.
restaurant. So it's sort
I
of,
sold cameras. Yeah.
salesing, or even like selling food at a vendor station. So you're having a conversation with someone, even if you're looking up their past shipping address and you're like typing to the computer, you're still having like small talk and you're still like kind of getting through and pulling more information out of them as
Right.
you're like typing. But the way that we are going to start inputting that information vocally to a voice assistant or a digital shopper is going to be completely different because like you're
Right.
saying, they can take in that consciousness, all of that information at once,
Hmm.
process it and deliver it.
So yeah. So I'll give you another example. I'm old enough to know when before there was Google, right? And now it's Ask Google, right? And I know it doesn't really mean that, but it means go to the internet and you can find anything, right? You couldn't. You had to go to
Right.
the library before. Well,
Oh,
I think it's similar in that sense. Once we realize that the voice assistant, once you realize what power you have, you can skip the searching yourself. She'll or he'll go do it for you. You know,
yeah.
show me all the different color pants in purple or something, and all of a sudden. So I think you have to couple the voice with the AI with some form of a way to present the information back, right? I mean, I think that's the missing piece we're talking here. But
Right.
once that's kind of figured out and we're kind of moving, well, now let's go back to what we were talking about before. Now I can use all that data. I can survey you and ask you questions. I can get empathy out of you. I can make you feel I really care about what you're saying. Another thing that these voice assistants can do and will do in the future is they can change their accent to meet yours. They can slow down, speed up. They can read what you're saying. They can understand if you're angry, you're sad. And then think about it. They can scale up or scale down when you're a busy season. So let's say, you're really busy around Christmas or holidays or whatever. Well, scale up 50 more servers and, they can do 24/7. There's just no way, in my opinion, that, human salesperson is going to compete with that. It's just
Well,
not
yeah. I
possible.
mean, yeah, it's definitely, in some respects, it's definitely going that way. At least now, I mean, we're going to want to communicate with a human because it is easier sometimes.
Yeah.
But like, I think the bank is an interesting example of this. Like, for a
Yeah.
while, you could call up at the bank and you could say, "What's my balance?" or press one to hear your balance. So
Press
like some of
one,
that,
press
like yeah,
five.
so some of that, like it makes sense why they're adopting the voice stuff earlier
Yeah,
because I
sure.
think it was easier to like
Right. Do you really want to talk to somebody?
no, but you just want to hear your balance. Like I just want to know
Right.
what it
Yeah. I just want to know
is.
my balance. Right. Yeah. I agree with that. Well, I say it's going to be the same thing. You think you might want to talk to a person, and I'm not saying anything bad about the person who owns the store or the salespeople. That's not my point. What I'm trying to say is that hundreds of people coming to that site, not knowing where to go buy, just a maze of things to look for. And yet you'd be like, this assistant would show up and go, "Hey, can I help?" And all it's going to do is ask you 4 questions, and then and you'll be like, "Wow, that was so easy. I will do it again." But like you said, to tie it back, it's the user experience. If these things won't roll out until users adopt it. I mean, companies might start it. That's what I was finding out about voice assistants, was that it won't really make a headway until some companies figure out and actually can make it work, right? Because if it fails, they instantly take it down. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
you can't leave it up. So it's yeah, go ahead.
that it's that incremental
Right,
sort of moves in some of this stuff. Like even though sometimes the technology is ahead of it, socially or
correct.
cognitively, we are
That's
not ready
You
for it.
nailed it. Yeah, you're right. I don't think
Um,
we're ready for it yet.
yeah, and some of the adoption stuff that we were talking about, I think another good example is like the QR code.
Good
Um,
example, yeah. Mhm.
and during COVID, the QR code became popular.
Downloaded everywhere, yeah. And
Yeah, and
like it
I
was
think
something new.
I think people were like, "Oh, interesting. Like, okay, now we're using these all of a sudden." So like, you'd go, scan something to place an order and pick it up without ever like seeing a person or talking to a person. But QR codes have been around for decades, like not decades, maybe plural, but for a really long time. So it's interesting that like this was a social, or it was social, what you would even call the pandemic, a global social everything, like an event that forced us to use this form of this technology. So I think we keep coming back to is the customer experience, making a better customer experience.
That's right.
And being conscious of like of the technology that meets what the society is or your user group is ready to accept, and how much and how you can survey them, that's up for debate. That's different to every store and every organization.
Right. I don't think the surveys are going to change until there's a way to use them better. And that's what I'm kind of saying. I think we're going to be able to take that survey with the virtual assistant and combine them and use them. I think they're poorly used right now. I mean, other than just, trying to figure out whether your business is doing okay or one of these things, but I don't think they're really used for sales very much. Let's put it that way.
Right. Well, or it gets it.
Passive.
Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
checks the box.
Right.
It drops into the CRM, and maybe you get some marketing material that's different. But this goes back to what we've talked about before in another episode, which was dynamic content.
Correct.
And when you put together the virtual assistant, the surveying of the data, and then you deliver curated content, which is the dynamic content.
Yep.
Now you're cooking.
It all goes together, right? And
cooking with gas.
Instead of being reactive, see, I feel the survey right now is reactive. I fill it out, you read it someday later, right? You're reacting to something I wrote, right? I think you got to be proactive, right? You know what I mean? In other words, how do I use that information now, instantly, while I'm talking to you? You see what I mean? That's the part that I think we have to. That's the fundamental shift. I don't know when it'll come, but stay tuned.
Yeah. So I think in closing,
we can end on that one. You're right.
Yeah, keep collecting that data. Think of creative ways that you can survey your customers, that you can get information from them, and then start to think about how you can use that information, not just in the future, but now. And then let us know. We can help you build it, right?
That's right. That's it.